G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and in this episode of getting started in the Horus Heresy, the Night Lords. Now this video has been a little bit delayed getting out. I started working on it a week ago, but unfortunately real life got in the way, as tends to happen sometimes. So hopefully we're somewhat back on track. I actually wanted to have the entire second part series wrapped up by now. Unfortunately it hasn't panned out that way, and I do apologise, but unfortunately adulting does come before hobby. Anyway, into the Night Lords themselves. I think Night Lords are a really strong legion. There's nothing they super excel at, but they don't have any glaring weaknesses either, which is something I like about them. Their talent for murder, for example, is flat out just a buff. There are only certain situations that it can be pulled off, but, well, they're not uncommon situations. You get it for shooting, and you get it in close combat. If you shoot against an enemy unit that is pinned or falling back, or you outnumber them in close combat, you get a bonus of +1 to all your to wound and to armor penetration rolls. That's really good. Vehicles count as 10 models for the purposes of this, so if you were to attack, say, a Land Raider, for example, if you had 11 models in the squad, so 10 models and an independent character attached to them, for example, you would gain +1 on all your armor penetration rolls. Just a simple buff. For Terminators, for instance, 6 of them would gain that buff against a Spartan or a Land Raider. So, yeah, handy. I like it. I like that as a rule. It's just giving you something, and you have to put yourself into advantageous situations to get it, which I think is very thematic, and that's part of why I like it so much. Going on from there, we get to the Night Lord's advanced reaction, the better part of Valor. If the enemy declares a charge on you during the assault phase, you may declare that you're using this reaction. You make a fallback move, so you roll your 2d6, move back that many inches, automatically rally. It's as if you never fell back at all, and if you're outside their charge range, then you're safe. However, if you fall back more than 12 inches, then they get to redirect their charge, potentially at another unit. So keep that in mind. Not a bad little reaction. It's thematic, and you kind of throw another unit under the bus, which is also pretty thematic. Warlord traits. We have the Warmonger. This is a traitor-only Warlord trait, and the Warlord and the unit that he joins gets +1 to all their to-hit rolls when targeting independent characters or units that have independent characters in them. On top of that, if you ally in Sons of Horus to this force, then you also get an additional bonus where your Warlord will gain Fearless, which, it's okay. You get an additional shooting reaction as well. Not a bad little Warlord trait. Jedek Clan Lord. A Warlord with this trait, and all the models in his unit get counterattack 1, and ignore all penalties to their movement and charge rolls due to terrain, and get to reroll failed dangerous terrain checks. They also get an additional reaction during the movement phase. It's not terrible. It's a little bit more situational, but the kind of units you would be putting this on would be, say, Warlords with jump packs, Warlords with bikes, that kind of thing. Less likely to put it on, say, Terminator Warlords. And with that in mind, it is actually quite good for them because they can make the most of that speed. Therefore, yeah, they're also going to be the units most affected by dangerous terrain, so it works well in that situation. The last Warlord trait is the Flame Master, and a Warlord with this trait gets Fear 1, and each time that Warlord is part of a combat that results in all enemies being destroyed, he actually increases that fear by an additional point. Now, he has to destroy them entirely, so it's either kills independent character in a challenge, that's a unit destroyed, runs down a unit through a sleeping advance, that's a unit destroyed, or just simply kills all the models facing him in an enemy unit, that's a unit destroyed. If you perform a challenge, win the challenge, kill the independent character, and then sweep their unit, you'll get 2 points straight away. That's my reading of the rule. And you get an additional reaction in the assault phase. So, all in all, I think all three are pretty thematic. I think the Flame Master, that one's really strong, because Fear 3, yeah, you are going to win combats. If you can outnumber and get up to Fear 3 with your Night Lords, you're going to start steamrolling combats, even if you win by just a little. So, very strong in that regard. Then we get to the Night Lord's Rites of War, and here's where things go pear-shaped. The first Rite of War is the Swift Blade. The Swift Blade is not a good Rite of War, and we'll get into why. So both the Night Lord's Rites of War have these very long effects, half a page of writing to describe what they do, and this Rite of War is no exception. What it boils down to is when you're using this Rite of War, the HQ choices must be a Praetor, you must take up to 5 of them. All the ones that aren't a Praetor must be a Legion Centurion, and they must take a Spatha Combat Bike or a Legion Scimitar Jet Bike. That's a lot to take in, because that's no Primus Medicaes, no Tech Marines, no Champions, no Masters of Signal, no Siege Breakers. You are just using stock Legion Centurions, which are not the greatest unit in the game. They're not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. They are still an independent character. They got some good war gear options, but you're very limited. And on top of that, all 5 combined count as a single Warlord choice for the purposes of Slay the Warlord. So you need to kill all 5 to get Slay the Warlord, and they all get to use a Warlord trait. And for every one of them, it's the Jadheg Clan Lord. So they're all getting that bonus on their bikes for charging through the difficult, dangerous terrain. Okay, but Night Lord Legion rules revolve around outnumbering your enemy in close combat. When you take bikes, they are expensive. That means you have less of them. In the old rules, you would have bulky and very bulky on those bikes. Unfortunately though, a bike-mounted model, even if they're on a jet bike, counts as less models than a jump pack. It is not advantageous, therefore, to take bikes over jump packs, especially because you're larger, you're easier to see, you're easier to shoot, you're easier to hit with template weapons, even if they aren't very good now, and you don't have the additional toughness that bikes used to grant. So all in all, it's actually quite a negative drawback. I do not like this Rite of War because of this effect. The Warlord trait, the Jadheg Clan Lord, and being able to take it sort of army-wide is very good. But the fact you're being forced into taking a very specific combination of HQs with a very specific combination of war gear that is going to chop a lot of points, I don't really value that. So because of that alone, I would be very hesitant to try the Swift Blade. There are better Rites of War for running bikes. You can also take Legion Outriders as troops in this detachment, but they are not line. So you're still going to have to pay to take tactical squads to hold objectives with this force. And bikes, again, are not cheap, and neither are Centurions on bikes. You're going to be paying 100 points plus on every one of those HQs. You're going to spend well over 500 points on your HQs alone. Worse, this is a primary detachment Rite of War only, which this would be an okay secondary detachment, an allied detachment as it were. Not great for primary. The Rite of War also won't allow you to take anyone that must be the Warlord, and it won't let you take a Primarch. But because of the restrictions on characters, you must take a Praetor. You can't even take a Delegatus to try and save a few points. You can't take a Herald or anything like that. It's rough. And you can also, and here's the worst part of the Rite of War, you can't take units that include the Heavy rule, Bombard rule, Slow, Super Heavy, or Artillery subtypes. That means all Cataphracti are out, Breaches are out, Rapiers are out. Yeah, anything like that, gone. You just don't want to do it, guys. You can't even take land speeders in this. Well, Javelin land speeders. You can take regular Proteus land speeders, but Javelins have the Heavy rule, so they're out. So, not a well-written Rite of War, because you would think this is encouraging you to take bikes and jet bikes. Bikes and jet bikes go really well with land speeders, and yet half the land speeder options are no longer available to you. Just badly written. Alright, let's go on from there to a good Rite of War, the Terror of Salt. So, another long effect. So the first effect here is all to do with night fighting. Essentially, it's night fighting turn 1 and turn 2. Turn 3, the player who is running the Night Lords gets to choose, do you keep night fighting or do you end the night fighting? If you choose not to end the night fighting, then you roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, it ends anyway. On a 4 or more, it ends at the start of turn 4. That's it. It was a very long and convoluted thing, and it took up like 5 paragraphs, but that's what it boils down to. You can also take Terror Squads and Night Raptors as troops choices in the detachment. However, they're not gaining the line subtype, so I think that's of questionable value. And any model with the Legionaries of Astartes Night Lords in this with the character subtype gains Fear 1. But Fear is included automatically onto the actual Night Raptors and Legion Terror Squads, so you won't be seeing much benefit from that rule. And if you took something like Flame Master, you're going to have that on your Warlord, so it's a neat little buff. It'll help out things like tactical squads and such, for sure. But don't consider it necessary for this Rite of War as a buff. Limitations can only be for your primary detachment, can only take a single heavy support, that's probably the biggest limiting factor. And an army whose primary detachment has this Rite of War may not include any Lords of War or models of the super heavy type. I think it's actually a very thematic Rite of War, and it's giving you some fun little toys and some additional force or slots you can move things around in. I think the Night Fighting especially really helps the Night Lord's playstyle, allowing you to close the distance with your really strong assault units and being somewhat immune to enemy fire whilst you're doing so is very valuable. Yes, there are ways of mitigating night fight the enemy may have, or even you may have. For example, there are ways that we're about to get into of getting night sight on all your units, night vision on all of your models in your Night Lord's army. So, you can do that. Night fighting is then advantageous for you. The only people who can sort of contest you in it are going to be other Night Lords players, some Mechanicum forces, and the Raven Guard, thanks to improvisers. Anyway, moving on to their weapons. So there's firstly Nostraman chain weapons. So Nostraman chain weapons are kind of like chain swords and chain glaives and that kind of thing. So they go up in order of strength, so +1 strength, +2 strength, double strength for the 3 different types, being chain blade, chain glaive, and headsman axe. When you have a chain blade, it's essentially a chain sword, but you're gaining breaching 6+. And it's always AP3, which is pretty good. Then the chain glaive goes to two-handed and gains, +1 strength over that. And the headsman's axe is also two-handed. They're pretty neat little weapons. I think they're thematic, they're good. They are not something you would depend on when it comes to killing enemy terminators, for example, but they will do the job. If you throw enough attacks out with them, they will do the job. The chain glaive really comes into its own when you have it on units that are able to take rad grenades, because then your attacks are going to be at strength 6, and they'll be able to instant kill models with multiple wounds who are normally toughness 4. Very strong in that regard. Going on from those, we have the Eschaton Power Core. Essentially Power Fist upgrade for your Legion Praetors, Legion Champions, Consoles, that kind of thing. It's Power Fist, and it's gaining Murderous Strike and Shred. So it kind of combines Lightning Core in as well. Yeah, really strong. If anyone's thinking of a model that would have a really good core that you could use for this, Luft Huron. The Forge World Luft Huron from the Astral Cores. Yeah, that to me looks like an Eschaton Power Core right there. And of course, I think Contekar Terminators have some in their kit as well, potentially. But yeah, that Power Core, pretty good. Alright, then we get to sort of 4 special rules, and they kind of one leads into the other type thing. So, Lords of Murder, independent characters can take it, 5 points, gives you the Bloody Murder special rule. What does Bloody Murder do? Essentially works the same way as your Legion trait does, when you outnumber, well, it's not that you're outnumbered, it's when you attack a pinned or falling back enemy, and you charge them, then you gain additional +1 modifier to your attacks. And your charge roll also gains a +1. It's a bit weird how it's worded, but that's how it boils down. Then there's Prey Sight. So 15 points only applies to models of the Night Lord's Legion special rule. Gives them 15 points for night vision. Yeah, you could take it on a whole unit of tanks, for example. So you could take a squadron of predators, 5 predators, pay 15 points. All 5 predators have night fight. Yeah. Now combine that with the Rite of War. You see what I'm getting at here, guys? That's a really smart way to play the Night Lords. And lastly, Trophies of Judgment, which is independent characters, character unit subtypes can take Fear for 10 points a model, and if they had any version of Fear, then the special rule is not upgraded by Trophies of Judgment. So there's no way of really stacking Fear apart from the Warlord trait that does it, and since the Terror Assault Rite of War, which for some reason is not trader only, well, I guess I can see why it's not, but because that's so easily available to get into, you may as well just take it and get this Trophies of Judgment for free anyway. But overall, good solid units. So let's move on now to the actual special units of the Legion. And we're going to start with the Terror Squad. So the Terror Squad, at 115 points, 5 models, 18 points per additional model. They're kind of Legion veterans. Weapon skill 4 is what hurts them. If they were weapon skill 5, this unit would be really, really strong. At only weapon skill 4, with all of the Night Lord's traits like Bloody Murder, having Infiltrate, Precision Strike 6+, having Preferred Enemy Infantry, yes, you can do things like load them all up with Chain Blades, but you're going to be pushing towards 30 points at that level. You're pushing Invictus Suzerain points then, and Invictus Suzerain are much, much better than Terror Squads, make no bones about it. Therefore, my suggestion with Terror Squads is to probably just load up on something like Volkite Charges and using your preferred enemy, infiltrate, getting close, and just hose down infantry squads with them, potentially. They can also take bolt guns, they can take rotor cannons, they can take flamers, but flamers are not very good in this edition. I've sort of been over it before, but template weapons in general are worse in this edition, namely down to the amount of units that have the heavy subtype, which means they get to reroll their armor saves against them. Doesn't matter how many wounds you saturate a unit with if they're getting 2+ rerollables in the case of Terminators. Therefore, taking something like Volkite Charges, which have Deflagrate, and which have just a decent strength, being at strength 5, combining that with the fact that as Terror Squads, and using your talent for murder, you could be potentially winning a lot of units on 2s. They pump out a decent amount of firepower. Even against Dreadnoughts, they could potentially take one down, although I wouldn't put good money on it. If the unit, though, was able to be weapon skill 5, this would be completely different. I would be doing something like recommending chain weapons across the unit, and going up to, say, that 28 points per model category. Yeah, that might be good. Especially with the precision strikes, but as it stands, no, I think they're okay. They probably could do with being cheaper. As an elite unit, if they were line, that would also make them absolutely amazing, but essentially you're paying 8 points more for a tactical marine with +1 attack, Fear 1, which we've already discussed is very easy to get in this army, Precision Strike 6+, but you don't really have any weapons to take advantage of. You don't have melter guns, for example. You don't have plasma guns, for example. You can only take a single plasma pistol on the unit. Yes, they've got Infiltrate. It's something, but with so many augury scanners and such out there, I wouldn't really put much weight on it. So it's really the preferred enemy that you're paying for. Is it worth 8 points for 1 attack, precision strikes that you can't really do much with, and preferred enemy? I would say no, it's not. So, as a unit, I'd say they're simply middle of the road, not good, not terrible, situational use. Going on from there, you get to the Night Raptors. Now, the Night Raptors, everything that Terror Squads sort of need, they have. They've got better mobility, thanks to having jump packs. They've got weapon skill 5, and that's crucial, because now you have a unit that, for only 7 points a model more, has gained a point of weapon skill, they've gained an additional wound, and they've gained additional speed thanks to the jump pack. That is worth it. That is very worth it for 7 points a model. On top of that, of course, they have sudden strike, and they have night vision built in, not that you're going to make much of the night vision. But being skirmish and being fast, they got a 3-inch coherency. Now, the 3-inch coherency also exists on the Terror Squad, but on the Night Raptors, it means that you don't need to get all of your models into really tight in, basically, in a close combat in order to get all of their attacks, whereas quite often the opposition player will have to get all their models crowded right in. This means that often on the first round of combat, when you perform the initial charge, and you can't quite get everyone pushed right in there because you haven't made your initiative step yet, these guys will generally get more attacks than the other player will. That is part of what's going to win you combats. When you look at the fact that they can take chain blades and chain glaives on the entire unit, I would suggest potentially a mix of the two. Probably chain blades I would lean towards just for the additional attacks. And then also being able to take a couple of lightning claws here and there. 10 points to give 2 lightning claws to any model in the squad. These guys become almost as good as Dark Furies, with 5 attacks on the charge, plus potentially additional attacks thanks to their Bloody Murder special rule. They can throw out a ridiculous amount of attacks, up to 6 per model. Even a 5-man squad, if they're all rocking lightning claws, is going to throw out 31 attacks on the charge. That are going to hit most units on 3s. They're going to wound most units on 3s, and they're going to get, thanks to their Legion trait, and they're going to get rerolls on those to wound rolls, and they're going to have rending in there, and they're going to have they're just putting out pain. They're going to win their combats. You can also take melter guns on the squad. Might be handy to take 1 or 2 in there because they do not have melter bombs. So if you do come across tanks and armor, it's probably good to have some sort of way of dealing with them. Even the lightning claws, in fact, against dreadnoughts, 5s to wound, 6s rend, 30 attacks. You could potentially put down a dreadnought with these guys. I wouldn't recommend it, but in a pinch, you could do it. Night Raptors, really, really strong. The Southern Strike also is another little buff boost in there. I rate them. I'm surprised that they have night vision because they don't really have any weapons that take advantage of night vision, but hey, it's thematic. And going on from there, we end up with the Contekar Terminator squad, and they've got things that seem like they'd be good on the surface. They have a powerful shooting weapon. It's basically a short-range Volkite Culverin with 1 less shot. They have weapon skill 5. They have chosen warriors. They can all issue and accept challenges. They're stubborn. They can be taken as a retinue, or they can be taken as a HQ choice in their own right. They have deep strike built in. They cause fear. What's wrong with them? Contekar Terminators are a lighter weight version of Death Shroud. So where Death Shroud are 3 wounds, they're battle hardened 1, they're just incredibly hard to kill. The Contekar don't have that. The Contekar will die to strength 8. They are really good at killing infantry. They cannot fight Terminators on an even footing because enemy Terminators will just instant kill them, especially with Thunderhammers, but with Power Fists and Chain Fists. Therefore, Contekar Terminators I can't recommend in most situations. I think the models are okay. They would make great conversions, but they lack the heavy special rules, so they're not going to be able to shrug off the template attacks that Cataphracti will, which kind of sucks for them. And because they cannot take Power Fists in any kind, when they go into a one-on-one fight with enemy Terminators, they are just going to get instant deathed, whereas they cannot return the favour on enemy Terminators. Yeah, they can get breaching attacks on them with their little chain blades, but you're praying to get 6s to wound, whereas the other guy is just going, hey, any wounds I do are going to instant kill you. That is not a situation you want to be in. For the points you're paying especially, you can pay 150 points for a pair of Death Shroud and put them into the enemy's deployment zone, and they have to deal with them, and they're going to be hard to deal with. You're paying 50% more again for a Contekar Terminator squad. Yes, you're getting more models out of it, but they're nowhere near as resilient. A few las cannon shots here and there, and they're done for, even with Deep Strike. I don't really see the use of the unit, and you're paying 5 points more than Cataphracti for them. Yes, they have the Volkite Cavator, which is a powerful weapon, but 10 inches range, if you want to be using these guys in close combat. That's what they're geared around. They have the attacks, they have the weapon skill, they have all their rules based around close combat, and yet they're being saddled with these short-ranged heavy weapons. If this unit had double the range, if they were 20 inches or 24 inches, something like that on the Volkite Cavitors, then I'd be recommending them as an okay unit to be used in your Rite of War because you're lacking heavy support choices in the Terror Assault. However, they don't have that. And they don't have Bloody Murder either, as an interesting point. So, I can't really recommend the Contekar Terminators. They don't have enough firepower or enough range on the firepower to justify them as a pseudo-heavy support choice. They don't have the killing power to fight enemy elite Terminators, which is really what you want Terminators for, to be able to kill the other guy's Terminators, because it's either them or Dreadnoughts that will do it. And they're competing with Dreadnoughts in the same slot, and Dreadnoughts are cheaper. And when it comes to killing infantry, yes, they are better at it than some Legion Terminator squads are, but so are Night Raptors. Night Raptors for, 185 points? The only thing that they have over Night Raptors is slightly better armor save, and they have an invul save. The Night Raptors, though, hit harder. They've got more attacks. They have the mobility to actually get into position and pick their fights. I would just go for Night Raptors over Contekar. There's no two ways about it for me personally. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it. Mac with the Outer Circle. Hope you all got something out of this Night Lords episode. Key takeaway, though, look at what counts as multiple models for the Talent for Murder special rule. Things like the Land Speeder will never get it. Bikes will almost never get it, because they don't have bulky rules because the writers didn't see a need to include it. That is a huge problem when one of your Warlord traits, one of your Rites of War, actually revolves around that. So, yeah, come on. Anyway, back with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.